What is going on, gunfighters, aspiring gunfighters, gun aficionados, people that just like guns, boys and girls of all ages? Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, the right way, with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world, first-hand experience. I am blessed to serve you as host today. I'll put in a bio, and then we'll get into the main topic, which is going to be centerfire rifles, battle rifles, assault rifles, versus the shotgun for your survivaling needs. I'll roll into a quick abbreviated bio and then into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories are with firearms. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. By God's grace, He got me through that safely. After that, I served as an instructor, an urban warfare instructor and a desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I also served with the LAPD, both full-time as a sworn police officer and some more specialized assignments, as well as serving in the U.S. Army, full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a FBI firearms instructor, still am an FBI firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years, also NRA certified and some other three-letter government agency certified. I've been a private contractor for a three-letter government agency I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. By God's grace, He got me through all that in one piece, not because I'm better, but because He chose to have grace and mercy on me. I've been a professional hunter and guide. Professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've done that, but I'm blessed to be able to say that I have. I've hunted everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast to gray squirrel on the East Coast to prairie dog on the West Coast, and elk and bear and wolf, and slain all manner of beast. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different disciplines. Now those experiences, it's not because I'm bigger or badder, certainly not bigger. In fact, I met one of the patrons in real life and he said something to the effect of, "I thought you'd be bigger." Reminded me of that William Wallace movie where he's like, "Oh yeah, if William Wallace were here, he'd shoot lightning bolts out of his rear end." Well, I'm not William Wallace, but I am the person that did all those things in the bio. But not because I'm bigger or badder. I don't think that I survived when many other young, good men did not. I give all the glory and all the credit to God, all the talents and experiences that He's given me and the things that He's let me live through. I hope to use them to glorify God and to help you today. So if I boast in anything, it's not in my strength. It's in that God had mercy on me and saved me because He had a purpose for me. And hopefully I can use those talent, skills, and abilities to serve you today. All right, the centerfire rifle versus the shotgun for your survivaling stuff hitting the fan, the peanut butter and chocolate hitting the fan, the end of the world as we know it, a localized, regional catastrophe, things like that. And I guess we should define parameters. The end of the world as we know it, not the end of the world completely, not like all life on Earth ceases to exist, but like the end of the world as we know it, meaning modern society and culture, although it changes all the time and vacillates, and some things get better. I would argue many things like morals and culture get worse, but culture is ever changing. I'm talking about vastly different in a short amount of time than we recognize it today. That kind of scenario. And I'm not going to go full doomsday prepper on you like I'm prepping for peak oil in 2025, August 21st. I don't know the future. I don't pretend to know the future. But one place where the Bible, the infallible Word of God, history and science all converge is that civilizations and societies collapse. It's kind of what they do, right? Just the thing that happens. So I don't know when, maybe my lifetime, maybe your lifetime, Maybe your kid's lifetime. Maybe not for 1,000 years. But at some point, things are going to be radically different than they are today. The end of the world as we know it. Survival, I think, for firearms comes in two main categories. I've talked about this before. The kind of the bifurcation of survival needs that can be filled with a firearm, putting food on the table, and defense, defending your life or the lives of others, and putting food on the table. Both those things are important. Now, whether they're equally important really kind of depends on your apocalypse, right? It really depends. Right? Are we talking a Red Dawn type scenario with whoever the top player is now, probably China? Or are we talking about an actual real pandemic that kills 90% of the population? Those are different scenarios. Many things will be similar in your survival needs. You still got to eat. But one may have a much larger emphasis on defense. You get the idea. And the point is, I don't know. I'm not preparing for a particular... Like, again, I'm not one of those preppers like, I'm preparing for the zombie apocalypse when COVID-24 gets released. I'm not that dude. I try to be prepared for a broad spectrum. Also, defining parameters. When I talk about shotgun, unless I specifically mention it, the default that I'm probably talking about is 12 gauge. And when I talk about rifles, I'm talking about a modern center fire rifle. And the default is going to be something like an AR-15, an AK-47, or a big full-powered rifle caliber battle rifle. One of the like in vogue terms that I never heard in the military or anything else is main battle rifle. For that, you're talking about like your M14, your AR-10s, your 308, 6.5 Creedmoor, bigger caliber, full-powered rifle. Because the other ones, AR-15s, AK-47s, they're not full power. They're intermediate rifle cartridges. But that whole family. And if you want to throw in, manual transmission guns like your scout rifles, your bolt actions, your lever actions, that family of rifle versus your common pump and semi-auto shotguns. I'm not talking about single-shot rifles for this. I think that would be kind of ludicrous unless that's just what you had. I'm not talking about single-shot shotguns, which I think would be equally ludicrous unless that's just what you had. Repeatable firepower. Done whole other episodes. I just did one, as a matter of fact, talking about the merits of a bolt action versus a lever action, and I've done some on pump action shotguns and semi-auto shotguns. I'm not going to get into minutia on that today, but I'm talking about repeatable firepower guns in center fire rifle calibers versus... Alright, let's, with those caveats and parameters kind of set out, let us sally forth into this hypothetical apocalyptic future wasteland. And the way I see it, there are, in general, some advantages to both. And there's minute stuff with different specific models. And if you go to the extreme, you might be able to counteract this. But let's just say in vast generalities. The shotgun is by far your most flexible long arm, period, on the planet, on the face of the earth in 2024 until they come out with some kind of phaser rifle with stun and, I don't know, whatever Star Trek, Star Wars menagerie you want to come up with. In 2024, the shotgun is the most versatile small arm on the planet, period. Like it or not, unless you're going to be like the not my president or nuh-uh kind of argument, the shotgun is the most versatile long arm on the planet. Again, I'm not saying you have to like shotguns, but you probably should admit that that's true. You can take anything from a quail, which there's quite a few out in back of where I'm at right now, from a quail to a grizzly bear, from a duck out of the air on the wing to a white-tailed deer or an elk. I can also do non-lethal, and you might think there's no room for non-lethal in the apocalypse, but It's capable of non-lethal. It's also a decent breaching round. It's not the only way to breach. I've been taught many different ways to breach. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and there's more than one way to get through a door. But it has a decent breaching capabilities. It also has signaling capabilities. It is the most flexible hunting tool, and it's also very capable for defense. And this is the big caveat, at moderate ranges. We're talking about if you don't just go to Walmart and buy random buckshot and expect it to be your good home defense tool and don't test it, because that's tantamount to ridiculousness in my opinion. Or you don't just go to Big Five and buy a box of slugs and think, oh, I'm going to go hunt deer now, without sighting in your shotgun like you would sight in a rifle. If you actually get several different loads and several different kinds of slugs and buckshot and test them out, we're talking 40 yards with the buckshot, 50 yards if you have a good load and a good choke, and out to 100, 125, 150 yards reasonable range with decent slugs. And I'm talking a smoothbore shotgun. I'm not talking about a specialty shotgun. I'm not talking about sabot slugs to a rifled barrel. That greatly increases your range, but you're basically turning it into a rifle at that point. It's a rifled barrel. It's a one-trick pony. It's shooting slugs, which negates the giant bonus of the shotgun, which is this flexibility. Talking with smoothbore barrel, the ability to interchange chokes, the ability to shoot from, number 9 shot to a 1 1/4 ounce Bernanke slug, from plucking a dove out of the air to stopping a semi-truck by shooting the engine block with Bernanke slugs. But your range is going to be limited to, let's just say 125 yards. Let's compromise from 100 to 150. Let's say 125 yards. That is a big compromise, and that's where it is the most versatile tool. That's probably its biggest setback. Now, I think a lot of people greatly overestimate range. I've mentioned the bio as a big game hunting guide. A lot of people greatly overestimate range. Go think about a football field, or go find a football field next time you're driving around. Go stop if you're not going to get arrested, and go stand on a football field, or look from one side of a football field to the other, and then add a quarter of that. 125 yards. I think a lot of people think nowadays, because we have instruments and computers and rangefinders and widgets and knobs on scopes let us click and dial and this and that let people shoot accurately out to 1,000 yards, 1,200 yards or greater. That somehow that's the new normal. But I don't think that is the new normal. Look at actual numbers at what actual game is taken at and what actual defensive uses are carried out. The vast majority, I don't want to just pull numbers out of my hat here, but the vast majority are well inside of 125 yards. So you are giving up a lot of range as far as numbers, but I would surmise that you're not giving up a lot as far as actual practical real-world scenarios go. Now, if you're talking about a specialty weapon, if you're talking about being a sniper in the apocalypse, if that's your apocalypse plan is to go out and be a sniper, this is probably not the episode for you. I'm talking about general purpose. You have one long gun. I'll give you an example. I'm out here on the high prairie on the Wild West. I'm a private security contractor. I didn't mention that in the bio because that was a pre-recorded bio. I'm currently a private security contractor doing stuff out in America's Wild West. We're talking Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah area. Wild West. I'm up on the high plains. Some of the most open, high desert country that you can imagine. I routinely get within 200 yards of pronghorn antelope just for funsies. Just for fun. I'm not even trying to kill them. I just want to look at them. We're talking about some of the most open, wide open country in the world. So if you think that you have to have a rifle that shoots 500 yards to kill an elk, I would say maybe stop watching a lot of marketing hype on TV. So I would say that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should necessarily do something or try to do something. Also, if you get a really specialized long-range rifle, which is absolutely capable of getting hits on steel at least at 1,000, 1,200 yards, that doesn't mean that that's a practical scenario. And that's a specialty tool. We're talking about a general use rifle. Go look at stats, and there are outliers, like in Afghanistan. Even that's not the majority. Those are outliers. But from World War I, we're talking modern Spitzer bullets and repeatable firepower firearms, when they had these sights regulated out to, 1,000 yards or Martians or 1,200 meters, because they thought these engagements were going to be super long range now that we had super long range guns. This is not a new thing, right? This marketing stuff goes in spirals. And they quickly realized, most fighting actually happens way, way closer than that. And that lesson gets learned over time. I mentioned I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps after my combat tours. My life experiences led me to believe that most violent encounters and most hunting scenarios happen inside of that. But I will concede that you are giving up a substantial amount of range if you pick a shotgun. That is its main drawback. It has the most versatility. It also has the most limited range. If we're talking about pretty mild pedestrian Breyers vanilla type rifles and cartridges, intermediate cartridges, right? The 223 5.56, which I've not been the biggest fan of, even though I've spent a large chunk of my life carrying that in violent environments and scenarios. I'm not a big fan of the cartridge. I don't really like it, but even it is capable out to 300 to 500 meters. That's way farther than 125 meters. I'm an expert rifleman in the Marine Corps. I was an expert rifleman in the Marine Corps way back in the day when we had M16A2s and we qualified with iron sights. I could hit a man-sized target consistently without any kind of rest or support for the rifle other than myself with iron sights at 500 meters. Could hit a man-sized target and hit it again and hit it again. Yeah, at 500 meters with a pretty vanilla, we're talking pretty crap ammo, crap beat up rifle, looked like it got drugged behind a deuce and a half. pretty basic equipment. I can get hits out to 500 meters. Outside of qualification, did I ever actually do something like that in combat? No. Because, again, most violent encounters happen far, far closer than that. And the fact that you think you're going to have the time to make a wind call and dial on your optic and get a good hasty sling while rounds are coming at your face, that's just, again, not generally how it went down. But you do, again, to illustrate that point, even with a pretty Breyers vanilla rifle and ammo, 500 meter, even the AK, which people say is like the wildly most inaccurate, just step above a shotgun, it's not. It's way, way more accurate. You're talking practical accuracy on a decent AK clone of 300 meters. And that cartridge, I would say, is even better round per round than the 5.56. And this is not the debate for that, but round per round, I think it's a better round. Yeah, I know, I said it. I think round per round, it's a better round, especially if you throw hunting medium-sized game into the equation. It's a better round than 5.56. 7.62 by 39 just is. It has disadvantages in being heavier and being able to carry less of it. I'm not saying you should pick it for the apocalypse. I'm just saying round per round, I think it's a better round. But even it, in a leaf-sighted AK-47 with iron sights, is a decent 300-yard weapon, if you can do your part. So we've come across, in a roundabout way, one of the big strengths of the rifle is accuracy. A lot of rifles today come with a 1 MOA guarantee. As much as we look back on nostalgia and wax nostalgic on the guns of WW2, or even the guns of WW1, right, the 1903 Springfield, the Mauser 98, you're talking 3 to 4 MOA guns, right? 3 to 4 MOA guns. Now we're talking, a lot of modern guns come with MOA accuracy guarantee, and that MOA guarantee may not be as MOA as you think it is, but still, there are a lot of really, really accurate rifles today. But even, let's say, 3 MOA, which is nothing to write your mom about today if you get a 3 MOA rifle, right? But you're talking 3.69 inches, which is well inside a chest cavity at 300 meters, right? It's far more accurate, far more range. You're well outside the 125-yard range of the shotgun. Also, the other big strength of the rifle is capacity and reloading capability. Talking traditional shotguns, but if you pick the rifle for this, unless there's some weird caveat, you're probably going to want to pick a detachable box magazine. That's kind of been the standard for a long time. You could pick something else, but let's just say the standard is detachable box magazine. I can, with an AR-15, drop out an empty magazine and throw in a new magazine from my war belt while moving to cover on a slow day, probably under 2 seconds, and have a full, fresh 30-round magazine, if that's what I so choose in that platform. You're not doing that with the shotgun. So range and capacity, a standard, not high-capacity assault weapon. There's nothing wrong with an assault weapon. Sometimes things need to be assaulted. I was an assaultman in the Marine Corps. I assaulted things. I don't apologize for that. Stop with this Orwellian newspeak garbage and let them say, oh, it's a modern sporting rifle. It's an assault rifle. Assault is not malum in se. The term assault, to assault something, is not evil by nature. If you came home from work and somebody was using your wife's body without her consent, would you not want to assault that person? There's a group of radical Islamic jihadists about to cut off a group of American citizens' heads with dull knives. Do you not want that team to assault those jihadis? Right, so just stop with that whole Orwellian newspeak, and you can't use this word, it's bad now. It is what it is. Look it up in the dictionary. The term assault is not evil. So I'm going to call them assault rifles. If you don't like it, go listen to something else. If that whole politically incorrect spew there offends you, I don't pretend to be politically correct. So a standard assault type rifle with a standard capacity magazine, we're talking 30 rounds. I actually kind of prefer 20s, because despite what the media might have you believe, I don't think a 30-round mag is any more dangerous than a 20-round mag, and I like the way 20-round mags let me maneuver in small spaces and get down low into a prone position and take it in and out of vehicles and bags and such. I actually prefer 20-round mags, but you get the idea. The standard is 30. I can have 30 rounds on tap and then very quickly have 30 more rounds on tap. That far exceeds a shotgun. If you consider the standard shotgun as 5 to 9 rounds. I know there's more. My grab and go to apocalypse shotgun is 13 rounds. But let's just say the standard. If you look at it round per round, you're talking 5 to 7, 9 maybe rounds of slugs or double-aught buck. But if you look at it a different way, if you look at double-aught buck, your standard there, not even going crazy, not even a magnum load, your standard load is 9 pellets. But if we go somewhere in the middle, let's say 7 rounds of 9-pellet double-aught buck, which is easily achievable in most modern shotguns, we're looking at 63 projectiles. So it just kind of depends on how you slice that pie. It's like comparing apples to oranges. But whereas you may, with a 223, require several good torso hits to put a man down, I'd struggle to find any case where somebody got a good torso hit with a full payload of double-aught buck and needed a second. So again, it really depends on how you do that math. The amount, and I know stopping power and knockdown power is not scientifically quantifiably a thing, but I will tell you that a man shot in the chest cavity with a full payload of double-aught buck reacts far differently than he might if he gets 1 round of 5.56. Sometimes the reaction will be fairly close to the same. Instantaneous incapacitation, and that'd be great. But you have a way higher propensity for that, however you want to quantify that, with a full payload of double-aught buck. We talk about in reasonable ranges. A shotgun is by far more devastating with the right load than an intermediate cartridge is. And I know what you're thinking. Well, that's why a real man in the apocalypse carries a 308. And I'm with you, right? If I'm picking my go-to apocalypse loadout and I'm picking a rifle, I'm going to pick 308. A close second in 2024 would be 6.5 Creedmoor. I know a lot of people just don't like me anymore. But it's a decent round. And it's still a full-powered rifle round. But my first choice would be 308 because it's the most common crossover. If we look at something like what will probably be my grab and go, which would be a Scar 17, 20 rounds of 308. And a 308, let's just say, double taps and Mozambiques really aren't a thing with 308. They're a thing with 5.56. That's far more powerful. And a 308 is a deliciously effective medium and large game hunting caliber. I was actually just out training with 308 yesterday. It's a great, and one of my first recommendations to somebody's like, hey, I want to get into hunting. Mostly I say don't get into deer hunting, get into small game hunting and then deer hunting. But a lot of people just want to go deer hunting. It's one of my number one recommendations, right? It's 308. It's a good, with proper loads, not with FMJ or like some milsurp round, but with good ammo. 308 is a really effective medium and large game hunting round. Shy of like Alaskan grizzly bears, it's a decent choice for most things in North America. I don't think it's as flexible as 30-06, but it's available in a lot more reliable, repeatable semi-auto platforms, which again I think is the standard box magazine fed semi-automatic shoulder fired weapon. 308 for that is plenty powerful, and you get good range. We talked about a pretty vanilla intermediate 300 to 500 yards. 308 is easily, and I know it's capable beyond this, but I'm just saying standard load, standard rifle is capable out to, let's say, 800. I'm talking you go to Walmart and get a bolt action Savage and a Walmart scope and a Walmart 308 load, and if you messed around with a couple of different loads, you could probably get a combination there that would let you reach out to 800 yards. Most of that has to do with your dialing and your computing power and your rangefinder, which I should address. I wouldn't plan on having battery-powered things in the apocalypse for very long. So without a rangefinder, you go back to point-blank range type stuff, in my opinion. But that just shows you how capable that round is at longer ranges. You talk about 800 yards versus 125 yards, that's a vast, vast difference. Not to be confused with vas deferens. It's a vast difference in the range capabilities. But, riddle me this there, Batman. We go back to the flexibility. Yeah, 308's a powerhouse when it comes to, being an efficient killer of medium-sized game. We're talking about hunting white-tailed deer. But what about that mourning dove? What about that sage grouse? Not just shooting it to kill it. Even if you were the best crack shot at shooting winged game with a rifle in the world, you were Tom Knapp, and you could pluck that dove out of the air with your AR-556 in mid-flight going at 40 miles an hour, hitting a target the size of your fist at 40 miles an hour flying through the air. Let's say you're that dude. The whole point of you shooting it out of the air is not just to kill it, it's to eat it. If you shoot it with a 5.56, it's arguable how much is going to be left there to eat. You shoot it with a 308, what happens? Right? So it's not nearly as flexible. And if you think you're going to be hunting, let's just say, because most people do that are listening to this, I know I have people from all over the world by God's grace, but let's just say the main portion of the demographic lives east of the Mississippi, certainly east of the Missouri River in the United States. There's a lot of white-tailed deer there. Arguably, and I've heard this before, more than when Columbus landed. There's more whitetail now. But the reason that is because, let's be real, a lot of people go with the lowest common denominator, and they'd rather go buy a pound of ground beef at the store wrapped in cellophane than actually go out and kill it themselves. And also, there's the fish and game laws and the heavy restrictions on how you can hunt. When all that goes away and people are starving to death, what happens to that white-tailed deer east of the Mississippi? I've heard from several places how sparse and close to extinction white-tailed deer were east of the Mississippi in the Great Depression. The Great Depression, the 1930s. Look at the population of human beings east of the Mississippi in 1930 versus today. I'm not going to hear and get into an argument. It really depends on what your apocalypse is, right? If there's a pandemic that wipes out 90% of the population like that, and you just happen to break contact quick enough, or you just have the genetics that it doesn't affect you, you're one of the 10%, then yeah, there'll probably be plenty of whitetail around. But if you're talking about some kind of slow collapse or invasion, or the economy collapses and food's hard to get, I can't imagine that Bambi's going to be prancing around very long for you to have a source of food. Much more abundant and much more readily replenishable is small game. Also, better if you're talking about staying in one place, because you're probably not packing this much salt on your back. You have to eat all year. You don't just have to eat the 2 weeks during hunting season. What happens when you're in South Georgia and you shoot a deer in July? Right, when you're listening to this, what's going to happen if you go out and shoot a deer right now? Unless you have a lot of salt. Because it's not like out here west, I could probably go to a barbed wire fence, and if I could keep the crows and the magpies and the coyotes away from it, I could probably make biltong with very little salt. It's so arid and humid, it's so arid and lacks humidity here. But you go to South Georgia and you shoot a deer, unless you have a bunch of salt and or vinegar or something else, without refrigeration, whatever you don't eat in a day or two is not going to be good in a day or two. So it's not, the rifle is not as flexible. Even if you're the best deer hunter in the world, I'm not talking about you ride on your quad or your side-by-side to a deer stand and put out corn. Because if you have corn, you're probably better off eating the corn. I'm talking about you can go out in the woods with just a rifle and harvest deer. Even if you're the best person in the world at that, you might have a lot of other responsibilities as a man during the apocalypse where you're not just going to be deer hunting all the time. So it may not be safe to be out deer hunting all the time. It may be much more likely, especially after a short time, that you're going to come across small game. Or if you're on the move, Oscar Mike, going from one place to another, a lot better that you shoot a grouse or two. I'm talking about out west. I know grouse aren't real common on the East Coast, but shoot a small game animal or two on the way that you can take with you and eat before it goes bad. And for that, the shotgun is way, way more flexible. And I can go back and forth, but I can throw in some number 6 shot and throw in a slug. So again, we get back to the flexibility. And this is just an internal dialogue debate. I think a lot of times, though, people base what they want off of what looks cool and what's fun to shoot. And I will admit that an AR-15 is a lot of fun to shoot. I grew up hunting, and I grew up a poor boy in the South, and I'm not going to pretend that I didn't poach growing up. I'm not even going to pretend that I knew what fish and game laws were. I'm going to say that I grew up putting meat on the table for the family. And I did it most of the time with a shotgun. And when I went, this is getting into the, I guess it ties into both, but when it gets into the first time I shot an M16, and I felt that buffer tube and that almost non-existent recoil, I was like, well, that's weird. That didn't even seem like a real gun to me. I'm still a boy at this point. That said, they're a lot of fun to shoot. And they're really tactical. And they look really cool on Instagram. We get you really cool, putting your brand here, BCM, Daniel Defense. You drop $3,000 on the rifle and $2,000 on the optic, and you throw a bunch of Barbie Dreamhouse accessories on it, and it looks really cool, and it's a lot of fun to shoot, and they are. I'm blessed to have a lot of really nice ARs that are a lot of fun to shoot. I think because you really like something and you want something to fit, you start trying to shove a square peg into a round hole. But just because you like them and they're fun to shoot and they're accurate doesn't make them the most practical choice. We're talking about survival here. We're not talking about faux survival. We're not talking about reality show survival. I don't even own a TV. I've never seen one of those shows, but I'm talking about real survival. Not some construed scenario they put you in. Not some, post-apocalyptic movie. You're the modern day Wyatt Earp in some post-apocalyptic tombstone scenario. If you looked at it soberly and circumspectly, what actually would be better? And I've said this example before, and your experience and stuff may differ from mine, but you heard a little bit about what I've done in the bio. And when I was doing some more specialized assignments and when I had access to a full armory of legit, submachine guns, I'm talking about the real ones that are full auto, and full auto CAR-15s and M16s, and literal Thompson machine guns, because we still had Thompson submachine guns, 45s, in the armory from Prohibition days, and M1 carbines, and Mini 14s, and really good, M16s. And really, really cool and a lot of fun to shoot that I would take out and shoot just for fun because I could. And some 308 machine guns and all kinds of cool stuff. If I was doing stuff in a modern city, most of the time, not always, sometimes I would take that CAR-15 and really like it. Sometimes I would take a good AR with a free floater barrel and an LPVO, depending on the mission, because looked at it practically, like I look at guns as practical tools. But the vast majority of the time in a violent situation, if I had the opportunity to introduce a long gun in the scenario, it was a shotgun. It was a shotgun with buckshot and slugs. It was an old school Remington 870 with buckshot and slugs, because Instagram wasn't a thing. I didn't care what looked cool. I wasn't posing for pictures. I was trying to stay breathing when that was not necessarily a foregone conclusion. One of the most common things that I would grab is a buckshot and slug, and we're not even talking about the flexibility of hunting in that scenario. We're just talking about in a modern layout, a modern arena, right? In a tactical environment, why am I exposing myself more than 150 yards? In almost any environment, I can get within 100 yards of somebody without them knowing I'm there. Usually way closer than that. And inside 100 yards, I can't imagine a more devastating small arm than a 12 gauge with buckshot and slugs in the side saddle. It's a legit tool. And if instead of what looks cool and what's fun to shoot and what goes pew 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 and what you can accessorize the most, what's actually practical? What do you think I'm going to tell you? Right, that depends. Have both. Right, have 3 or 4. Have a core battery. But as far as today's discussion goes, there's even a big debate on whether for this kind of scenario you would want an intermediate cartridge like an AR or a full-powered rifle cartridge like an M14 or a SCAR 17. That's a debate. So probably have a really good, not a Gucci, but a workhorse, really good, zeroed, solid AR-15 option, and have a really good full-powered rifle option, and have a really, really good repeatable firepower pump or semi-auto shotgun. And debating the different platforms is not really relevant for this discussion. It will get too myopic. But probably have all 3 of those, plus a good 22, because that's its own discussion. Plus a really good modern combat handgun, which is another discussion. And then you get into, is that better than a revolver for the apocalypse? And blah. The point of today's episode, they're both good. They both have weaknesses and strength. I think the shotgun is the most flexible. If you said, all right, you have a forethought, you have insider knowledge, because I don't pretend to know the future, but like, I'm a private security contractor for people doing stuff and things. If I got several independent, because by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses a matter is established, different agencies, different people telling me the peanut butter and chocolate is about to hit the fan tomorrow. And that's all we can say. We can't say how, we can't say what, but we like you, you're a good dude, we want you to be ready. If I have no other caveats, I'm grabbing a shotgun. In fact, right now, we live in a beautiful sea of high prairie, surrounded by millions of acres of public land, but I drive into the city, some 40 miles or more into a city. Guess what's in the back seat of my wife's car, because I generally drive my wife's car so I don't have to spend the gas on the truck. 12 gauge, buckshot and slugs, and some birdshot. Right? And there may be other scenarios where I would pick a rifle for sure. Right? If I see a bunch of Red Star communist parachutes coming out of the sky, then yeah, I probably want a rifle for that. If you give me no other caveats, because I've lived a life by God's grace and I'm still breathing, not because I'm great, but because God chose to have a purpose for me, and hopefully so I can serve you guys as a professional gunfighter. But the amount of violent encounters that I've been in pales in comparison, by far, to the amount of times I've had to eat. And when it comes to putting food on the table for myself and my family, shotgun's better at that. And that's part of the survival equation. And it's not bad for defense in most scenarios. Now, could I get in a scenario where a rifle is better? For sure. And sometimes it is, and sometimes I would pick a rifle. But again, if you give me no other caveats, I'd pick the shotgun. If you give me caveats, I might pick the rifle. And perhaps you have reasons why you would choose the rifle. I'm not here to tell you that I'm right and you're wrong. I'm not that conceited. I'm just trying to lay out in this episode the pros and cons in an overarching big picture kind of way and let you make your own choice. If you decide you want to run into the apocalypse with black multicam Crye precision pants, if Crye makes good pants, but if they even make black multicam, I don't know. I'm just saying, with your AR-15, your Daniel Defense, which is a good brand, and your nods and all that stuff, if that's what you decide, that's fine. But make an informed decision, and that's what I'm trying to do today. Not tell you you're right or wrong, but trying to inform you. And I'm going to give you what I, in a broad spectrum, no insider thing of what I know at the end of the world as we know it's going to look like, broad spectrum, what I would pick and why. And I'm not telling you you're wrong. And again, if I'm not limited to one, if I'm not on foot covering large distances and I can have more than one long gun, then I want a battery, which is not this episode. But it's just a thought experiment, guys. And hopefully it got you thinking. And if I forgot anything big, we could get down all kinds of rabbit holes on this platform versus that platform, and direct impingement is garbage, and everybody knows that buckshot's only good at 25 yards, or whatever. We could get down all kinds of crazy rabbit holes. But hopefully this was a good overarching thought experiment for you guys. It's already a pretty long episode. So I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I got asked for more of the deep philosophical kind of gun content, and hopefully this was one. It's a pretty big episode. For that reason, I will post this to Patreon early, ad-free, commercial-free, because there's probably going to be a lot in a long episode like this. Just so you guys know, I don't have say on what ads go into the podcast. That's by the host, whoever hosts the podcast, which for me is Spreaker, right? I can tell Spreaker, I don't want any kind of sexual content or illegal content or political content, but that's really it. They put in the ads. If you want ad-free content, go to Patreon. Also, generally what will happen is if they comment, I can't say that I respond to every post on there, but if people have questions, I try and answer them pretty quickly on Patreon. So that, and they get a lot of cool insider-only content. Anyway, that said, if you want to become a patron, consider becoming a patron. If this show was a blessing to you, if you would like to be a blessing to me, there are many ways you can do that. You can pray for me, which really sincerely is appreciated. I certainly could use it. You can subscribe, leave a review of the podcast. I don't know how, but somehow analytically I'm told that helps the podcast. If you would like to share this podcast or any other episode you think somebody might like with somebody else, that's a blessing. And if you want to become a patron, that is a blessing as well. With that, your tactical tip of the day. Bicycle inner tubes. Yeah, super, super tactical. Anyway, if you know what a Ranger band is, it's like a big beefy rubber band. Good for a lot of things, holding kit together. Pretty much anything you could think a big beefy rubber band would be good for. You can buy them pre-cut and everything, but you're spending quite a bit of money, and you can go to some kind of big store, Walmart, Big Five. I'm not sponsored by anybody, especially not Walmart. But you can go to a store and get an entire bike inner tube fairly cheaply. You can cut that into whatever size band you want. They're also really, really good fire starters. So if you want a lot of good, cheap Ranger bands of your own size, as thick as you want, one thing I like to do with those, if you've listened for any length of time, I'm big on EDCing a fixed blade knife. Well, on the sheath, I like to put a big Ranger band, at least one, for a lot of reasons. I like to put things like water purification tablets and stuff on my knife. It just makes sense to me. But also, I like to have a ferrocerium rod and a Ranger band. There's a lot of flexibility there. So, cutting a bike inner tube to make Ranger bands. That's your tactical tip of the day, your tactical verse of the day. They profess to know God, but in works they deny him, being abominable, disobedient, and disqualified for every good work. Men, don't just say you're a Christian. That's not for me to judge or not. But don't just say you're a Christian. Be a Christian. Live as a Christian. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.